This episode, we discussed Denis Diderot, a French philosopher during the Age of Enlightenment whose love of learning and writing changed not only his life, but the access of information for the entire world. Welcome to From What We've Gathered with hosts Danny Nelson and Kylie Shahar.
In the land of Diderot daughters, I prefer a slide. Turbulent or gentle waters, let's go for a ride.
Hi, Kylie.
Hi, Danny.
So, this is kind of the scenario this week is kind of this picture of education and society today.
Yeah.
So here's kind of the scenario that we're going to consider. It's not necessarily our life choices, but we're going to talk about Denis Diderot. And I want to start off with kind of what does education mean now?
Yeah.
So as a professor, you have a student in your class. She's a junior. She's doing pretty good. She's she's someone who finished high school. She started college. Her mom went to the same college. Mm-hmm. Her grandma went to this college. Mm-hmm. There was never a moment in her life where the expectation wasn't that she was going to be going to the school. Mm-hmm. And now that she's in her third year of it, she still just doesn't care about it. Oh, this is something that people her whole life have been eventually you'll figure out what you're going to want to do. And then it'll change your whole kind of desire proposition around education. Yeah. But honestly, every class she sits in, she's just, I don't care. Yeah. And she's just making enough grade. She's not trying to succeed. She's not trying to be the star of anything. Yeah. What was it that you said one time as C's get degrees?
Yeah.
Never forget your doctor only had to get a C.
To be clear, I didn't.
She's like, I just want to make sure everyone knows that you do not become a professor, an academic by.
I worked really hard.
That's because you have a curiosity about education.
And
hopefully
a problem with perfectionism, but we'll table that.
We'll table that for later. So the question, because what we're really talking about in this series is the good life.
Right.
So my question is this girl in this scenario living the good life? Because there's a lot of things you can say about
for sure, she's
getting a thing that everyone dreams of. But sure. Now this is a very casual, this is a widespread, less of a dream and more of a societal expectation.
Yeah, for sure. Often I think a lot of people, I'm not, it's not right or wrong, but I think just making an observation that a lot of people go to college because it's just an instrumental choice to make just for down the road or something like that.
Right. They're they're like, oh, I'm not ready for adulthood. And it doesn't matter because the expectation is that there is this thing I do.
Yeah. Or
in between.
Yeah. Or it's I have no idea what I would possibly want to do. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to college and then I'll figure it out there. But then what happens in this scenario when you find out, oh, I'm not figuring it out, or maybe I have some idea of some career choice, but this college stuff is just not serving me. I just am not, there's nothing that I feel I'm getting from it, or maybe kind of, sort of, but it doesn't feel like it's, those benefits outweigh the literal cost of doing this, right, or whatever it is. And so, so in our scenario, this troubled junior finds herself sort of, I guess maybe you could wonder, questioning, hey, should I keep doing this? Or maybe I just, don't. And I do something else that I find will bring me, that I find will be the kind of thing that charts the path to my good life,
my flourishing. Yeah. And so I think many ways, so tying it back to previous people that we've looked at in the previous kind of scenarios around the good life, is this kind of question you can presume is attached to wisdom. So when you look at the cardinal virtues and look at wisdom, we can suppose that one of these areas of wisdom include education, knowledge. Yeah. So not just being someone who's street smart, but someone who understands like where did we come from,
Right.
economics,
Yeah.
you know, the sciences to a certain extent, you know, like
For sure.
like a generalized knowledge base
Yeah.
that allows an educated person to kind of like be wise and
Yeah.
have more kind of like a growth prospect towards wisdom that is
Yeah.
bigger than someone who doesn't have access to education in particular.
Yeah.
So let's take out for just a second that this
Yeah.
is modern society.
Right.
If we were talking about 2,000 years ago,
Yeah.
when we're talking about Hellenistic wisdom and we might be talking about education and stuff, that's a whole scenario where it's almost like you were lucky. And this comes back to Aristotle being like, there are conditions that need to be, you can't be virtuous without these minimum
Yeah.
kind of circumstances, which included being somewhat wealthy.
Yeah.
Because you'd have access to education. So wisdom then education is a much different story than now, where it is like, it's not just the people who really desire it, right? Because there are people like that were slaves, like Epicurus and people like that, who sought out knowledge because they were so curious and they wanted it so bad.
Right.
Again, that's a different person than this girl who is sitting in class, whose society from day one has just presumed that she would be sitting in this class, no matter what her individual self is like. And so, is this the good life? Is she headed toward is she training for the good life?
Right.
Where does that training, where is that bubble of education versus intellect versus societal expectations?
For sure.
And I just want you guys to know that Kylie and I, when we even started trying to break down this particular, we went into like 75 different directions.
Yeah.
About
it's
education
well,
and the good
because-
life.
Yeah, because it's such, I mean, it really is, it's such a unique kind of case study, like education in the good life, because it's like, you could think about education in so many different ways, right? Where you think about, I mean, you think about very basic education, like learning to read and learning basic arithmetic. But then you think about, you know, like way down the road after you've accumulated a lot of these really kind of basic skills or abilities, right? The kind of curiosity that's tied to education, or like wisdom, or the development of intellect, or your critical thinking skills. Like there are so many different angles to think about education. And it's also such a unique sort of medium, because a lot of the times, maybe a lot of the times we tend to pigeonhole education into things like arithmetic and just like knowing facts and stuff like that.
Yep.
But there's another way to like think or look about education, which kind of ties into some of what Diderot was thinking of, which I'm sure we'll get to in a minute. But of thinking about education and learning as a uniquely humanistic sort of enterprise, right? Where it's like when you're thinking about, like, not only is it about like street smarts, but it's also like, where did we come from? Like what were like past cultures and civilizations and societies like that have brought us to this particular moment where we have these particular norms and that sort of thing. Like thinking about history or economics or philosophy or sociology or anthropology or even physics and mathematics, like all of that is kind of wrapped into this very unique human experience of thinking about a humanistic kind of like study, which is like, you know, sort of when you think about it from that scale, you're like, well, dang.
Yeah. And I love that you that you just brought it out to that really wide lens, because as we go into Diderot, who was an Enlightenment era philosopher, he was like besties with Rousseau, who's one of the most famous ever, and I referred to him a few, like, just because a lot of people know him, but they were like best friends. So they were really close to each other. So he had a very strong like liberalism, like personal rights and individualism. Like these are the people who are saying like all people have rights and dignity that should be availed to them. Through government, through social, just through the church. Like everyone has value intrinsically of being a person. So And that should include education.
Yeah.
And that is,
Yes.
this is why we started off with this kind of discussion of like
Right.
education and the good life, because there's now been thousands of years invested into us getting to the point where we can even discuss the value of prescribed education.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
500 years ago, even, this did not exist.
Right.
300 years ago,
Yeah, exactly.
even, this did not exist. So this idea of like the law says
Right.
a child has to go to school,
Yeah.
you know, like, which I am not disputing, and we're not going to dispute in this.
Yeah,
This is not what we are trying to do. But that this was a fight to make it happen.
Yeah.
But this is where you get to think about, it's fun to think about when does society jump the shark? When does this prescription of education like move into a negative impact into someone's personal happiness?
Yes.
Like, when does a person, an individual, get to say, you know what? I'm 16 now,
Right.
and I don't want to do calculus.
Yeah. I heard that.
And there's a lot of people, like, you know, there is a huge thing to say, like, just suffer through it, because in the end, it's better that you've kind of checked it out, and maybe you do want it or you don't want it. You don't know.
Right.
You might be a genius
Right.
at it.
Yeah.
But who is it us? Who are we to say?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we've made it law.
Yeah.
Like, no, you must go to pre-cal,
Yeah.
like, you know,
Yeah.
or whatever. So that's kind of this is like what the whole discussion about. And the reason that we're talking about Denis Diderot is because he is someone who fought for his whole life for the general populace to have education and access to knowledge that is not filtered through the monarchy or the church. Mm-hmm. His whole thing is, because academia was really just then growing as kind of its own kind of population of people. Again, the academy was thousands of years old, but like as a population of people, this is where like the scientist, you know, like it just was an expansion of what that is. And so Denis Diderot, he was in France. This is like, he was born in 1713, just to give you kind of a general time period. And he was born to a cutler. His dad was a cutler, meaning that he made like swords and knives and stuff. So
Fancy.
he was someone who was like a artisan, but like a higher class artisan,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But still like not, you know, he's not in nobility. They're not rich
Right.
or anything like that. Denis is obviously like a very smart guy. He spends a lifetime just being like kind of a hilarious genius in a lot of ways. But he went to go, like, when he was young, to seminary, and then was like, you know what, the church isn't for me. In fact, what I like to do is argue against the church. And his dad disowned him. And then he started like hanging out with all the like at cafes. I told you this,
classic.
like French men.
They love their cafes.
They love to meet each other at a cafe. They like him and a bunch of like famous musicians, and it's the same story of Sartre and Camus. Like,
Yeah.
it's just a few hundred years previous. Same scenario.
So nice.
They're like watching Dancing Ladies. No, I don't know about the Dancing Ladies, but they are at a cafe when they meet. And but he marries an older woman who is very poor, like and his dad double disowned him. He's like, I know I already disowned you.
I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know that was on the table.
I just want to let you know again.
Again.
Like, first of all, you didn't go into the church, and then you're going to marry an older poor lady. And he, you know, and Diderot's like, yeah, whatever, you know. He also like had many like love affairs and like mistresses and stuff throughout his life. He just was like, he was a character. Like he was someone who was known as like an incredible wit. Like he really enjoyed kind of like, he believed that if you weren't getting joy out of like conversation and stuff, no matter how serious it was, like
You should just walk away.
you should. But he also is one of those people who did a million things a day, like because this is where I'll introduce his other than writing a novel about talking vaginas, which he did do on the Dare of a Mistress.
Nice.
He wrote essentially the Vagina Monologues, that was about a sultan who had a magic ring that he could point at a lady and then her sex organs would tell him all of their secrets.
Wow. That is something else.
But he got in a lot of trouble for it.
Oh, no,
Because
really?
of vulgarity. Yeah.
Oh, no.
They said it was
not
vulgar.
in 1740. No.
They thought it was vulgar. They're like, you know what? We're not ready for talking vaginas yet.
Wait a few hundred years. Then it'll be on stage.
Kylie is like slightly blushing because I think she's just imagining someday like her grandmother running into this podcast. Hold on.
not gonna
Your
happen.
grandmother doesn't speak English. Right?
She'll be like, this is great.
You're like, no, she said vagine. It is a perfume. It is a
Coco
perfume.
Chanel.
I didn't say it was a good perfume. No. Okay, sorry. Okay. Back to the story. I'm sure that's one of the stories. We'll read it and get back to you guys.
We'll let you know.
I'm trying to convince her to start an early modern reading group that's only talking vagina stories.
It could happen. It could happen.
So, anyway, he is most famous for being one of the originators of a little project that we call the Encyclopedia.
You might have heard of it. Went out of style when the internet kind of came about.
And they changed it to Wikipedia.
And then they changed it to Wikipedia. So
Which
we
is
have
still-
an online version of the encyclopedia, basically.
And if you go and look at Wikipedia and the start of it, they actually talk like they're like Diderot is like the patron saint of Wikipedia because he would wake up every day and be like, okay, this morning I'm writing about animals in South America, like whatever, a listing and
maybe the Eleutherodactylus dignithoides.
I don't even know what
That's
that
the Texas
is.
tree frog. That's a shout out to my friend Jared. He taught me that.
He 100% didn't know about the Texas tree frog because Texas didn't exist at this point.
Oh, that's right. It was,
I mean, it existed.
well, right. But
not as a. Although he was very excited about the United States, which at the time was just the colonies. He was very excited that it could become this like independent republic society.
Oh, that's very
like he was just like Rousseau.
Yeah.
He was like, this is our opportunity for like true democracy.
Right.
Anyways, he might wake up in the morning and be like, okay, here is all of the royal line of France.
Oh,
Wow.
Oh,
So he might start off the morning being like, yes, we're listing royalty for the last 200 years. And in the afternoon, he might be making illustrations of insects
That makes me
for
feel
the encyclopedia.
really badly when I feel accomplished in replying to like 4 or 5 emails in the morning.
They said he wrote like 17,000 words a day sometimes.
That is
Like,
truly
I don't
remarkable.
I don't even, with,
I don't think in a year I've
how-
written 17,000 words.
do I know 17,000 words?
Probably
like, I don't
not.
know that I know
Yeah.
17,000 words, but like, he was that kind of prolific person.
Incredible.
And then he was also really famous for like reviewing plays and stuff. So it's not even like,
a critic,
it
an
wasn't
art critic.
Like he wasn't a hermit.
Yeah.
He was someone who was like,
Out there in
oh,
the
I'm going
world.
to the museum. Like I've been invited to all the museums because I'm like a wit that is very good at art critique. And like, he had a bunch of friends that were musicians. So he would go to all the, he just was an incredible human being, very curious, and got pulled into after the whole thing with the vulgarity and thing. He ended up in prison, and then he promised not to publish any more vulgar things. So part of his excitement of being a part of the encyclopedia was that he kind of had to reduce what his, because he was always on the precipice of being arrested. Like he was always, and he'd already been imprisoned. And so he was like, I really didn't like that.
Yeah.
In fact, there's this whole segment of time when he was imprisoned when the only book that he had was the book he had on him, which was A Paradise Lost.
Oh, wow.
He had it on him when he was arrested. And then for months and months and months.
Just read this
It was the only book
Milton.
he had. And then there were all of these really famous people, like in the 1720s, 30s, or whatever, this time period,
Yeah.
who wrote to the king to be like, hey, you have a genius locked up
Oh, wow.
with like one book that it's just like wasting
Yeah.
a valuable commodity to
Yeah.
the French people.
Yeah. Right.
Like you should let him at
Yeah.
least have access to a library.
Yeah.
Which he did, which then now he can write the encyclopedia because all he did was be in prison and read all day in
Nice.
the library. So anyway, part of creating this encyclopedia was the idea that, like I said earlier, the individual person, the individual citizen of France,
Yeah.
which to him actually included women and people of color and like whatever,
Yeah.
because he had this whole social justice mindset,
Yeah.
was that that there should be a standard of information. There should be a truth. There is the truth. And up until this point, essentially truth was filtered through what the church or the monarchy said was the truth. Like essentially they were the ones who were like, this is the information you're going to give the general people. These are the books that are allowed to exist.
Right. The censorship.
I'm going to send all the soldiers to destroy all the books. Because this is the other
ban
thing
the
with the
books.
encyclopedia.
Yeah.
They were printing 4,000 copies, which seems like now that would be like nothing.
Yeah.
But the fact that there would be 4,000 copies, and
Yeah.
these are multiple books,
Right.
so
Yeah.
like, but so that you can't just destroy 4,000 copies of a thing.
Yeah.
And so they, what was happening were all these academics were now deciding, like, okay, people should get all this information. It should be the truth.
Yeah.
As far as they know it at the time, which was like decided as a group and whatever. Well, guess who didn't like that? The church and the king. So they kept shutting down the project. They would constantly shut down the project and stuff like that. And they would keep pushing it forward and all of these great thinkers. And there were people who were, Catherine the Great was famously someone who was not only like the benefactor to a lot of philosophers and scientists and stuff, but she also had this thing that Russia, who she was queen of, and thus, if Russia did it, the rest, that their citizens would be better people if they were educated.
Yeah.
And so she also had this mindset of like, she was very much in support of the printing press.
Yeah.
Like a lot of monarchies fought the printing press being brought into their country because, again, now you have no control over the information that is just going. Pamphlets galore.
Yes.
You guys know we love a pamphlet.
Love a pamphlet.
These pamphlets are starting to like fly.
Yeah.
And Catherine the Great is one of the people who is like, yes, like we should, like, what an incredible invention that now so many people will have access to information and blah, 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 and all these things. Of course, it just starts immediately being used as propaganda.
Yeah.
Propaganda. So,
For
but
sure.
that's the price you pay.
Yes, exactly.
For every good
Right.
notion,
Yeah.
there might be a more negative notion. So, Diderot, within this project, and something that is so cool about him, is because he was like no longer allowed to kind of like spread his personal philosophy, which he still did through like letters and things like that.
Yeah.
He utilized this project to create all of these like scenarios of social justice within the way he wrote the articles in the encyclopedia. So things like, a kind of classic example of that is a lot of people like knew that there was this incredible richness coming from the West Indies, but like, what did they oh, there were just a bunch of primitives there, and he's like, well, here's the geography, this is how long it takes to get there, this is the year we came there the first time. But then he would also be like, these are the number of people who die a year because of the conditions there.
Right.
This is the number of enslaved people who are like creating wealth for this very small number of people.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
And so he wasn't telling not the truth, but he also wasn't filtering out facts that were
Right.
abolitionist in nature.
Yeah.
But he wasn't telling you to come to a conclusion.
Right.
So these were the things the encyclopedia kept getting, shut down or whatever.
Yeah.
And this force of like, hey, people have rights they have a right to know. They have a right to know that if you're saying France is doing this thing, we are the French people. The French people are France.
Yeah.
Not just Louis the 14th or whatever.
Right.
Even though there's something to be said for people who are monarchists would be like, well, God has said that, whatever. Right. Louis the 14th is the representative of God within France, blah, 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 blah. But all these people who are individualists and were like, monarchies are dumb.
Yeah.
So this is kind of this proposition of widespread education.
Yeah.
That people should have standardized information that groups of people have decided are true.
Right.
Not just the Pope, not just a king, not just, whatever wizened old man by a pond.
Yeah. And knowledge or facts that haven't been sanitized and filtered, through this sort of central power that sort of decides what should be disseminated or what should be sort of withheld, right? Which prevents people from both understanding what's going on and prevents people from thus making a fully informed, judgment about it, or judgment in support or judgment in very, vehement, disagreement. And so, I mean, I think it's, a really remarkable kind of project that, again, like when you think then about education, and we're thinking about like education from like the humanistic lens, right? It's like kind of starting from this fundamental principle or question of like, what kind of creature are human beings?
Right.
Right? Like we're rational creatures with these faculties that can be developed or can be sort of hindered when you don't give people information or tools or skills or abilities, like the ability to read and the access to knowledge and information. So what kind of, we're rational creatures, and right in this sort of like liberal, right, like liberal tradition, right, liberal tradition where people are thought to have these natural liberties, like in virtue of the kind of creature that you are, this human being, you have these natural rights. One of those natural rights is a right to liberty, right? What does that entail? Well, first of all, it entails being free from somebody's absolute and arbitrary power. Like, what Diderot is seeing, what's happening in the West Indies, he's like, that's contrary to human beings' natural right to liberty.
Right.
What else? People being prevented from learning how to read, how to write, people being prevented from access to certain kinds of information that would help them to form more, full judgments and exercise their rational capacities for themselves is kind of, in some ways, you might think, an affront to their natural right to liberty. Like that's preventing you from exercising, like sort of for your kind of full blown natural, or what we sometimes call it inalienable right to liberty. Yep. And so it's like you see all these things kind of intersecting at the point of like education as like this thing from this like humanistic perspective. It's not just like learn your numbers and percentages and how to calculate this.
But where does it go from being your right to being your requirement?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question.
And that's part of when we're talking about the good life of like, how much does society... Okay, now it is accessible. Yeah. You have access.
Oh my gosh, yes.
In modernity, you have access to so much information.
I mean, on YouTube alone, YouTube and podcasts, you can get a bachelor's degree really from the kinds of lectures and things that are available to you. Yeah,
absolutely. It is. Yeah, your personal curiosity could be assuaged. Is that how you say that word? Assuaged?
Assuaged.
In seconds. Yeah. Just through one moment of curiosity. Like, you can go and find unlimited things. Now, the hard part of the internet is whether those are true or not.
For sure.
Like, because again, with the encyclopedia, there's like, a whole group of people who are deciding what, like, do we all agree?
Right.
And of course, as we know, because like now we're familiar with like the Encyclopedia Britannica or like different versions of encyclopedias.
Yeah.
Because the original encyclopedia, the idea is we are writing down all of human knowledge.
Yeah. That's a tall order.
It's a tall order to be like, everything we know,
Yeah.
we're going to write down.
Yeah.
So that people can also know it.
it.
So you know that there's all this editing and stuff that happens all the time, and there's all these people who are fact checking, and this is like the different. What's interesting about Wikipedia as opposed to just like any old news site, as there are people who are being like, "Is that true?" This is the difference between a news station that's for entertainment, and a news station that is for actual news. Is because news entertainment needs to include conjecture.
Yeah,
it doesn't necessarily mean facts.
Right.
It means opinions, beliefs, like all of these things that are entertainment based and not supposedly fact based.
Right.
And so, anyways, that's its whole own controversy. But this is like, you know, in Denis Diderot's mind, and in that time period, the most important thing was that education should be available.
Yeah.
Our question to you within the good life is, like we said earlier, does availability, when does availability and requirement deter what makes you happiest in your life? And we come at this from two such different worlds, where you were in school the maximum amount of time. Yeah. Because you're still in school. Yeah. You just teach it now. Yeah. You've literally never left it. You started kindergarten.
Oh my God. Preschool.
And now you've never left schooling.
Oh, no, it's a kind of prison, if you will.
No, it's not.
Oh, no, it's not. You're right. It's totally not.
Do you feel like it's a prison?
No, not at all.
Okay. I'm like, I feel like you're like happily curious.
Yeah, but when you put it like that.
Yeah, but it's something you found that is your happiness.
Yeah.
Whereas you look at this girl sitting in your class or in a class. Right. This is not a real person. It's a very hypothetical person. You look at this person who may be sitting in a class who's being like almost tormented by it. Yeah. I wouldn't say go so far into torment because we specifically worded the scenario the way we did because that's the point. It's not a torment.
Exactly.
It's just not adding. Is it adding anything?
Right.
Is it taking anything?
Exactly.
Like that's our question.
That's the question.
And what we found through our discussion about it today is we could not come to a conclusion about it. But it's fun to talk about. It's really fun to talk about it in this scenario where, you know, I don't have a degree, but I am highly curious. Yeah. And so I consider myself pretty well educated. Yeah. But not through a traditional, I don't have papers. Yeah. Show me your papers. I do not have the papers.
Which is like, again, kind of like, you know, obviously in some ways, like the paper itself is kind of meaningless.
Yep.
Right. Like it doesn't, really, like it doesn't mean much, right? Because you could not have it and be just as educated, curious, etc. And even more so than somebody who got the paper, who thought C's get degrees. I'm just like, I'm honestly here just because my mom, you know, expects me to do it and somebody else is paying for it or whatever.
Yeah.
And so you're like, whatever, I'm just here to party and like hopefully meet somebody or whatever it is, right? It's like, it's really not, I mean, like the paper, it's like, really sometimes all the paper means, and I think this is wrong, sometimes all the paper means is, oh, well, in certain careers, there's just a ceiling, right? You can't advance past a certain position without a degree, which is so arbitrary. It is ridiculous.
Crazy. Yeah, it is crazy.
Your professional experience, your capabilities, your references, like your long history with the company, for instance, like you're telling me that doesn't override the fact that I didn't get a degree 25 years ago. Yeah. You know, so part
It's
of that
weird.
is about the system and the commodification of these degrees,
Of the
right?
papers, yeah.
And unfortunately, I mean, I'm saying this as somebody who works at a university, like the institution has become a for-profit institution,
Yes.
just like everything else, right? Like,
Because we live in a capitalist
that's-
society, so now it is.
they're like, here, we're going to increase enrollments. We're going
and
to
every
increase.
year it has to be more.
Increase-
There's no such thing as being like good enough.
Yeah, like, oh, we've made enough money here. Yeah, no, it's right. There's, and you know, and like, look, that's not like a tear down criticism of, I mean,
Academia
yeah,
in
like
general.
it just, it seems to just be par for the course at this point. I
Yep.
mean, like everything, you know, which is, but that's not to say you can't get something genuinely good and valuable out of something. Of course you can, right?
Absolutely.
And you don't have to, that's not the necessary avenue to
It's
get
not
something.
the necessary.
Yeah.
Again, because all the things we're, you know, when we're talking about the good life, part of what we want you to consider is the outside of societal expectation. To consider
Yeah.
what have I just been told,
Right,
as
sure.
opposed to what is my inner
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah, like,
joy and flourishing.
Yeah.
And I will even say this, in your example of the fictional person partying and maybe they meet someone, I would still say maybe that is the good life for them.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
The education part of it, but the like, I get to be irresponsible for 4 more years while I just like
Yeah.
expend my youth.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
That may be
yeah, for sure.
living the good life. We
sure.
we touched on hedonism.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
know, like
Yeah.
we can't make the judgment for that person if they're
Right.
spending their time in a good way. Although in the scenario that we created, we can have a discussion around like, is that time they're spending worth the time that they're spending
Yeah,
doing it?
exactly.
When you consider the good life.
Exactly.
I just want whoever you are, listener, to think about what education has played in your personal happiness. Like, what has it looked like for you to stay in school, not be in school, to look into information, to do, you know, people fall into these vortexes on the internet and they
Yes.
come out and they're like, oh my gosh, I just spent 3 hours looking at ancient Greek double flute players.
Is that a thing?
I think it is.
Wow.
War flutes.
War flutes. Okay.
But you can do that now. You
Yeah,
know
you
what I mean?
can.
So
You can.
So I mean, thinking about like, you know, for your life, where does curiosity meet that? Where does education meet that? I know a lot of people who like go into their career and then decide to get master's degrees because they want to specialize more. Like
Yeah.
their education was too generalized and they're like, oh, I actually do want to be better informed and
Yeah.
kind of stabilize my understanding on this certain sections of things. Then you have like, you know, the people who are just like really want everyone else's approval who get PhDs.
Yeah. Happens all the time.
I'm just kidding. You don't want anyone's approval except for your own and everyone else's and your parents.
From What We Gathered is brought to you with gratitude by Tyler Olson, our sound producer, editor, performance wrangler, Danny Nelson, co-host and producer, and me, co-host Kylie Shahar. A special thanks to Sam Fisher for our music, and thank you to those from whom we've gathered, our teachers, scholars, historians, lovers of wisdom, the internet, and of course, thank you, our listeners.